different ones.
Okay, thank you. So we are now on live. All right, I got you. So I'm going to put the rest on the screen and you may take it from here, Mother Kitty. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Mother Kitty.
Okay, so Hare Krishna, everybody. Nice to see you again. So we're still on Canto 1, Chapter 15. We're now on verse 41. Vacham yohava manashi tat pranay tare chatam mritya vapanam sotsargam tam panchatvehi ajohavit. Translation. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Yudhishthira, like his brother Arjun, began to concentrate and gradually became freed from all material bondage. First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind, or in other words, he turned his mind toward the transcendental service of the Lord. He prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions and reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards the transcendental service to the Lord. There was no longer a need for material activities. Actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are the reflection of the eternal soul. But the quality of the activities can be changed from matter to the transcendental service of the Lord. The material color of the mind is changed when one washes it clean of the contaminations of life breathing, and thereby frees it from the contamination of repeated births and deaths and situates it in pure spiritual life. All is manifested by the temporary embodiment of the material body, which is a production of the mind at the time of death. And if the mind is purified by practice of transcendental loving service to the Lord and is constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is no more chance of the mind's producing another material body after death. It will be freed from absorption and material contamination. The pure soul will be able to return home back to Godhead. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyscha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So it's nice to be back. I always enjoy everyone's association here. You always have wonderful reflections and points and questions. And this particular verse, you know, I was just sharing before we went onto the live that it was a bit of a surprise to me because all this time I thought I was doing a completely different verse because I'd misread the poster. And then about an hour ago, I was like, oh no, it's a completely different verse. But then when I read the verse, I thought, wow, this is one of Prabhupada's killer purports, where he gives everything in a really short, condensed nectar, like condensed milk is like just the best. Everything you need just in a short paragraph. That's what he's given us. And I almost feel like what I'm speaking on, I've had to literally break down each paragraph line by line. Actually, we're at the stage of this chapter where Yudhishthira Maharaj, foreseeing that Kali has now begun, Kali's power has now started to manifest, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, because Krishna's left. So Kali can now actually really properly manifest, because Kali can't really do anything in Krishna's presence. So he's like, I'm out of here. There's no point in me sticking around. And so in the previous verse, he's renounced, he's made preparations for someone to continue, his grandson to continue, take up the throne. He's given up his opulent clothes, his golden belt, his crown, all of these things. He's externally renounced. And then in this verse, it's describing how he's moving from external renunciation to internal renunciation to actually internal then connection. So renouncing, saying goodbye to actually connect more deeply. Now, this verse straight away, actually, in Prabhupada's purport reminded me of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verses 6 to 8, where Krishna is speaking about the time of death with Arjun. And he explains to him that whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Therefore, Arjun, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Parth, is sure to reach me. Now, it's interesting because we as devotees so often talk about preparing for the time of death, living our life in such a way that at the time of death, the state we remember at the time of death is Krishna, because that's the state we shall attain without fail. How do I live my life in such a way that I'm only thinking of my Lord when I'm leaving? Yudhishthira Maharaj is doing this while he's living and breathing. He's not leaving his body yet, but he's getting himself in that state of mind as if I'm in this world, but this world means nothing to me. Because actually at the time of death, that is what we're forcibly put into. We're put into a condition of whether you like it or not, the world actually now means nothing to you because you're going to get nothing from this world anymore. You have to leave, right? So Yudhishthira Maharaj is doing an intelligent thing. He's not waiting for the time of death to achieve prem. He's not waiting till the time of death to see if what he shall attain based on what he thinks of. He's deciding right now, actually, I'm going to withdraw my senses from the external world. I'm going to absorb my senses into my mind, and I'm going to place my mind at the lotus feet of Krishna so that I can actually ultimately think of him so that my mind is completely absorbed in him. You know, this is, we look at this purport. I want to come back to this purport. Maharaji Yudhishthira, like his brother Arjun, began to concentrate and gradually became freed from all material bondage. This is by concentrating. First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. Or in other words, he turned his mind towards the transcendental service of the Lord. Now, just that sentence, I'm going to split it into the two halves, okay? First, he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. Now, you might be thinking, well, how does one do that? How do we withdraw our senses into our mind? You know, we do this all the time. It's actually a natural function that we're all familiar with. I'm sure everybody here has daydreamed. Even if you've not done a guided meditation, everybody has daydreamed. When we are in a guided meditation or in a daydream, what happens? Our senses actually withdraw, they amalgamate into the mind. Now, let's just think about it. If we were to meditate on or daydream about being, you could think about the Bahamas, but let's think about Vrindavan, okay? Right? You meditate on Vrindavan, okay? Or somewhere where you feel safe, where you can literally, using your senses and your experiences of your senses, you can withdraw them, merge them into the mind, and think about how the warm, cooling breeze feels against your skin. You're standing in Vrindavan and you're inhaling, that's the action of the sense of smell, inhaling and smelling the fragrance of the jasmine flowers, using your sense of touch to feel the sand beneath your feet. Okay, you're using the action of hearing to listen to the sound of the mridanga, the kartals, and the holy name. You can hear the monkeys and the birds, right? With your eyes, the actions of your eyes. So this is all with your eyes closed. Your senses are merging inside your mind, right? So in this way, actually amalgamating the senses into the mind is not something that is alien to us. We do it all the time. This is how we engage in actions without physically doing anything. You know, we are able to absorb the senses into the mind, and it's such a powerful process that it leads to a reciprocal, actually, response in the senses. If we all closed our eyes for a moment and imagined ourselves in Vrindavan and imagined our feet touching the soft sand, some of you may quite literally be able to feel it between your feet, between your toes and underneath your feet, you know, and in some, it may even lead to a very relaxing response in the body. If we did that, for example, with the fragrance of jasmines or the sound of the kirtan, again, same, there will be a response in the body. So amalgamating the senses into the mind is not something that we are strangers to. But what Maharaj Yudhishthira, in the second half of this sentence, is explaining, first he concentrated all the actions of the senses and amalgamated them into the mind. So he withdrew them into the mind. Or in other words, he turned his mind towards the transcendental service of the Lord. So he meditated on serving Krishna. He was using his five senses to serve Krishna. So because his five senses were now merging with the mind and he was able to meditate on serving Krishna, his senses and mind became one. Whatever he was thinking about was manifesting in his senses. And then inevitably, it's going to manifest in the false ego, because the false ego and the senses sit so closely together. You know, the senses are a via medium for the false ego to express what the false ego wants, right? So this is a really, I think, a really powerful point for us to understand just in our human experience of life here, that the way our senses relate to the mind and the false ego really determines whether our mind is directed towards our outward life, our transient ego, right? Because it's a bridge, isn't it? The mind is a tirtha, actually a bridge. It faces two ways. It can face outwards to our transient identity, the false ego and the senses, or it turns inwards through the direction of the spiritualized intelligence and the soul. You know, as Prabhupada says in this purport, what does he say? This is very wonderful. He says, actually, the activities of the mind cannot be stopped, for they are the reflection of the eternal soul. But the quality of the activities can be changed from matter to the transcendental service of the Lord. Okay, so this is when the mind's bridge, we're going in the other direction. This is what Maharaji Yudhishthira is doing. He's turning everything in the direction of Krishna, starting with the most outward sense of who he is, which is his senses, also his false ego, because he's given up his belt, his crown, his throne. Okay, so the most external aspects of the self, he's merged into the mind. And that mind is, you know, he's using it as to change the direction from outward looking to inward looking by nourishing then his mind on the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And, you know, we have this, he says, Prabhupada explains that he prayed that since all material activities are performed by the mind in terms of actions and reactions of the material senses, and since he was going back to Godhead, the mind would wind up its material activities and be turned towards the transcendental service to the Lord. And that's another powerful point, because all our material activities are actually performed by the mind first, right? Because behind every action, there absolutely has to be an intention. Behind every intention, there has to be contemplation, which means thinking and feeling it. You won't eat a chocolate cake unless you contemplate eating a chocolate cake, right? But prior to contemplation, we have to have a desire for it. And prior to a desire, we have to be exposed. Okay, so every action is born first in the mind. So Maharaji Yudhishthira is very clear on this. He's bringing, well, hang on, this makes sense. Since every action is born of the mind, let me first actually just withdraw from this outside world, go deep into my mind first, and use my mind as a bridge to carry me into myself. Because actually, if we look at the process of bhakti as well, the process of bhakti, we're looking from Shraddha to Prem. Once we achieve Nishtha, what happens? Whether we choose whether we get the path of Raghunuga Bhakti in practice, so devotional service and spontaneous devotional service in practice, or we continue with Vaidhi Bhakti, both lead to Ruchi, which is taste. A taste, I like Krishna, I like serving Krishna. Then Ashakti, I am attached to serving Krishna, attachment. What's the difference? Liking serving Krishna is when it's there, when he's there, we are very fond of it when it happens. Okay, we adore it. But with attachment, not only do you like the object of your attachment, but when the object of your attachment is missing, you miss that person, you miss that thing. When in their absence, you miss them. So at Ruchi and Ashakti, and even at particularly at spontaneous devotional service and practice, this is what we do with our mind. We use that mind as a gateway to take us inwards. But for this to happen, the mind has to be a friend, right? We talk about the mind as an enemy and then the mind as a friend. So how do we go from one polarity of looking outwards and the mind is my enemy because it's trying to pull me away from Krishna. It's trying to pull me away from myself. How do I make it my friend? The friend who leads me to myself, leads me to Krishna, leads me to my relationship with Krishna. There's that intermediary stage before an enemy becomes a friend, before your mind becomes your friend. The mind first has to become your student. What's a student? A student is a willing participant in education, right? We talk about spiritualizing the intelligence, so the mind has something to follow. But the mind has to be a willing participant. When it's an enemy, it's not. When it's a friend, that means the willing participation has finished. It's actually finished its education and training. The intermediary stage is being a student. So the key quality of a student that strengthens the relationship between a student and a teacher is what? Trust. And every student trusts a teacher who understands them. So if you are the teacher of your mind, we must understand our own mind. We must study our own mind before we are able to really apply our spiritual intelligence, before we are really able to, before the mind will really go, okay, you know what, I'm going to become a cooperative student. I'm going to listen to what you're saying because you understand me so well. So I know I don't normally do this with you guys, but I've got a little exercise to do with you, because, you know, we're all here in this together. We all want what Krishna is telling Arjun and what Mother Maharaj Yudhishthira is doing while he's living and breathing, that whether it's at the end of this life, but better and more ideally during this life, whatever state we remember, that state we shall attain. Well, whatever you think of now, it'll come. Whatever you think of in 5 minutes, it will come, it will manifest. Without a shadow of a doubt, it will manifest in some shape or form. The more times you think about it, the more gross will be the manifestation. But even if it's just fleeting, there'll be some subtle manifestation of it somewhere. It will happen. It's not simply that it just gets lost into nothingness. So we want to make sure that we are trying to have such a strong attachment and attraction for Guru and Krishna, that whether it's like Maharaj Yudhishthira, we're like, okay, right, I've done my external renunciation, let me do my internal renunciation, now let me connect, right? Or whether it's at the time of death, whether it's forced by death or whether it's voluntary during life, we want to be at that stage where, let me see, is there anything else that my mind might go to, which is more important? Because actually to understand our mind means to rigorously introspect and study it, which requires humility. And the reason it requires humility is because in the beginning, we always over-identify with the mind. We always think I am the mind. So it is very ego-crushing when we actually see what the nature of our mind is. But when we realize that we're not the mind, then actually it has less power over us. We're better able to not just reform it, but also control it and not be controlled by it. And we're less embarrassed by it as well. It's less humiliating. It's more humbling rather than humiliating. So I have 3 questions, which I think can help each of us to really see, okay, what's important to me right now? If Krishna came as time and my time came right now, whatever state you remember, that state you shall attain without fail. Where do my desires lie right now? And some of them are very covered, okay? Because desire doesn't just mean where is my affection, it also means where is my aversion, where is my avoidance. So I have 3 questions. It would be wonderful if people can either note it on their phone or a pen and paper. I'm always a fan of pen and paper because there's something very powerful about making a connection between sight and touch, because our senses are paired, you know, they work in pairs. So first question is, right now, in this current space in your life, not when you were 15, not when you were 25, not when you were 3 years old, right now, in this stage of your life, where does your interest automatically go, even if nobody gave you instructions on what you should do? Okay, where do you find your interest automatically goes to, other than Krishna? Is there anywhere that you find your interest goes to, other than Krishna, when you're left with spare time, your duties are done for the day, your sadhana's done for the day? Is there anything you find yourself doing spontaneously, irresistibly, your interest? I don't know. It could be anything. It could be football. It could be playing the djembe. I don't know. It could be anything. It could be fashion. Who knows? I mean, maybe you're a pure devotee. Maybe your mind always goes to Krishna. But this is also a wonderful thing to acknowledge, that your mind already has an attraction for Krishna. But yeah, first question is, where does your interest, where does your mind spontaneously go when nobody instructs you, when you don't have activity to occupy it? And I'm talking about something that's attractive. Where does your affection go? Where does it go to your family? Does it go to your oldest child? Does it go to your middle child? Does it go to your parents? Do you fondly think of them? Who does it go to? Who does it go to? And what does it go to? Does it go to money? You know, and sometimes, you know, these things, they are attraction or affection, depending on what stage of life you're at, will either go towards your particular varna, your occupation, could go to your family. It could be going to somebody, particularly in the temple or the community that you're living in. So this is attraction. Where does your interest lie? Now that's an obvious one, right? Our interest, if you're interested in something, it's pretty obvious that, yeah, that's important to me. And it may be even more important to me than Krishna. Second question, a little less obvious, but this also is a big distraction when it comes to renounce. What do you worry about? Right now, what is your biggest worry? What gives you most anxiety? What gives you most anxiety right now? What problem seems so attractive, so powerful, that the problem seems more powerful than Krishna himself? Mind goes, let's think about that. Let's problem solve. Surely we can come up with a better solution than Krishna. What do you worry about right now? What is your biggest worry? Where do you find your mind going? Alice, do you have a question that's related to what we're doing now?
Yeah, Alice, do you have a question or something related to the question she asked?
You have to unmute her to speak. Alice, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, she's been asked to unmute. Maybe we go to Grace.
Grace, did you have a question related to this?
Grace is not yet here and her mic is not on.
Oh, okay. All right, let's just move on then. Okay, so your biggest worry. And then last, even more hidden, okay, in terms of what's important to us, is what are you avoiding? What are you avoiding? What in your life are you avoiding right now? And sometimes this is the most powerful thing, because when we're really averse to something, when we really don't want it, I mean, that's a type of attachment, right? We're attached to not having something. We avoid it. Where's your biggest fear? You're so scared you don't even want to look at it, right? People who don't like spiders, they're like this, right? If you don't like a spider, you're like, you don't even want to look. Or if you're scared of heights, don't you climb a ladder? Don't look down, don't look down, don't look down, don't look right. So whatever we're most scared of, and fear is an attachment. What are you avoiding right now? Maybe you're avoiding a particular decision. Maybe you're avoiding a person. What are you avoiding? Now, this is just a cross section. This is just now, right? The mind is vast. The mind is vast. It can reach any corner of material creation. It's a bottomless pit of desires, worries, and avoidance. So yes, we want to rigorously introspect, but we also don't want to get stuck, right? We don't want to get stuck. That exercise, for now, I'm going to leave that with you, leave it private. And then maybe later on in the question and answers, if people want to say something or share, we can bring it back. But I wanted to use these because these are anchors. These questions are being rigorous about our introspection means it's guided, it's directed. It's not just I space out and I sit there with a pen and paper and just write whatever comes out into my mind. You ask your mind some very serious, specific questions. This is rigorous. When you interview someone, when the police rigorously interrogate someone, they ask a lot of questions, right? So we want to rigorously introspect, then we have to look what's going on in my mind. So these 3 questions can be helpful. But in understanding our mind, this vast mind, which is vast in terms of time and space and where it goes, it is always informed by the past, the present, and the future, right? We all have a background score from our past, our internal dialogue. There's a background music that sets the scene for everything we do, right? You can use different ways of looking at this. If you're perhaps older like me, you'll understand it more in the context of movies, right? You can watch a scene in a forest. You put on tranquil music in the background, that scene in the forest becomes blissful. It's like, yeah, this is so relaxing, right? You'll see it on meditation videos. That same forest, you add horror music to it, that forest will become frightening. and it will invoke very different emotions. Why? Because the background music is different. Right? So this is our internal dialogue. This is what our past has given us. If you're of a younger generation, maybe you'll understand algorithms. You know, just like social media has algorithms, how they decide what's advertised to you, what isn't advertised to you, what video comes up first, what other next video comes up based on the choices you make. Algorithms constantly changing what's presented to you based on your past experiences and choices, right? The background, again, what's the program running in the background of your computer? So this is the past. The mind is always informed by the past. So some of our rigorous introspection means looking back at our past and seeing, okay, what experiences did I have which can change the way I view things? Now you look at Yudhishthira Maharaj, his past is full of Krishna. He grew up with Krishna. He's surrounded by Krishna. He talked with Krishna. He played with Krishna. He served Krishna. He fought with Krishna. And he did so many things with Krishna. So actually everything, his past, present, future is all Krishna. He's ensured that whether he switches on his internal connection at the time of death or whether he decides to switch on his internal connection because he's gone, right, Kali's coming, I'm leaving. Here's my belt, here's my crown, somebody take over, I'm off. You know, he can do it in a moment. Why? Because he's absorbed like that. But our mind isn't, right? Our mind isn't, not yet, not for everybody. And so we have to look back at the past. That's also another part. The present is all about what are we feeding our mind right now? And I'm going to come back to that. And then the future, we have to have, if we just dwell in the past, dwelling means we look at the past and we just sit there, fascinated by the background music. Wow, that happened because my mother said this to me when I was 5 years old. That happened because my father did this to me when I was 8 years old. You know, one can get fascinated, spend so long like dwelling on it that you don't move forward. So this is why we need short-term goals, right? Short-term goals help us to come out of our internal dialogue. Just like in the movie, you have the background score for the forest, but the scene's got to change. The scene's got to change or you get bored. So we have to develop short-term goals for our student, the mind. So, hello, student. Thank you for being obedient. I know your nature. Let's set some goals up which will help you, that I know you will thrive on. Okay, so these are also important based on your on those 3 questions, the things you find you're spontaneously attached and attracted to, the things that you are spontaneously worrying about, and the things you're avoiding. You can look at, what happened in my past that makes this so attractive, that makes me worry about this so much, or that makes me avoid this so much. Same time, create some short-term goals to dealing with all of those so that actually ultimately you can then take shelter of Krishna. So I want to bring it back to the present, because actually this process of Krishna consciousness is not just about mind games. It's not just about psychologically manipulating the mind, doing mental gymnastics. It's actually a transcendental process of transformation. That means the transformation taking place defies time and space. So it doesn't matter if the mind can fit anywhere in the material universe or go anywhere in the material universe. It's still inferior to the process of bhakti, because the process of bhakti is born of Krishna. Krishna's name is Krishna, non-different. So the effect of Krishna's name is as powerful as him. Hearing about him, his story is as powerful as being with him, because we are in his story. We just don't know where yet. Just don't know where. Remembering him is as good as being with him, because ultimately Krishna's name, his form, his qualities, his pastimes, any sense we engage in connecting with him can transform every part of us, the mind, the body, and who we actually are. Whereas the mind, changes we make in the mind stay generally in the mind. The worst thing the mind can do is keep us in illusion. That's it. It only has power in this material realm. Nothing beyond that. Big deal. Big deal. The mind is with us while we're in a dream. Okay, but what we feed our mind ultimately determines whether we are more likely to look outwards, whether we're more likely to turn inwards, whether the impetus to live in this world, like Krishna is saying to Arjuna, fight, but think of me. You can carry on doing what you've got to do here, but think of me. Because then what happens is, at the end of all of this, you can do what Yudhishthira Maharaj is doing right now, whipping off his belt, whipping off his crown, and going into samadhi. That is what he's doing. He's going into samadhi. He's going into his real self. Why? Coming back to this whole point of desire. If exposure leads to a desire, then that actually means we can design our desires. If we start living a life where our desires are designed, then discipline will automatically follow. Because our actions always follow our desires. The main reason why we're not disciplined, the main reason why we struggle with discipline is because it seems dry and disconnected to our desires. Because what is discipline? Discipline is regulated activity to achieve a particular goal. When we're desirous of something, regulated activity automatically follows. In fact, immersive regulated activity automatically follows. So if we start to design our desires, okay, by choosing what we expose ourselves to, then discipline will automatically follow. It's inevitable. It's inevitable because when the mind is first our enemy, we then start to understand it. Let me see what my enemy looks like. Let me see why you're pushing against me. You know, some of you might have teenage children, right? The first 12 years of their life, they will listen to everything you say, like you are as good as God. And then their own ego starts to develop. And it's important, it's necessary. They need to know who they are. And they may push back about everything that you say, question everything you say. And all the good things that you say, they go, yeah, I had that idea. I don't remember you teaching me. You know, they tell you things like this. And they push back. What does a teenager need? A teenager needs understanding. You understand your teenager. Even if they try and push against you, they kind of go, they catch themselves like, well, hang on a minute, you're being understanding. And they can't help it. They start cooperating. And they're kind of a little irritated. Like, wow, why am I finding myself cooperating with you? Because you're being understanding. If you're understanding of your mind. And you start to then slowly, okay, well, let's start designing some desires. Let's start engaging in activities that you will like, that lean towards your natural proclivities. The desires start to change. And then what felt like discipline actually just happens regularly, frequently, right? Consistently. I want to do something, an illustration of designing our desires. And I'll have a question for you afterwards. I want to read something to you. This is a very short passage from the Swing Festival Pastimes from Ananda Vrindavan Champu by Kavi Karnapurna. Krishna entered the swing arena with his left arm resting on Radha's shoulder, holding his flute. In his right hand, Krishna twirled a lotus flower while his bangles chimed happily. A pleasing peacock feather topped his reddish turban that tilted attractively to one side. Krishna's elegant earrings and ear lotuses swung in the breeze created by the bees circling his head. Fine cloth kissed his limbs, lit by the jewels of his crown and bracelets. Krishna shone attractively with his pearl necklaces tinged red from the rays of his Kaustubha jewel. Light, delicate footsteps accented his graceful yet playful gait. Jeweled anklets and bells adorned his lotus feet. Krishna, his splendid lips shining, appeared somewhat drowsy from chewing betel nut. Yet his effulgence easily defeated the combined radiance of all the jewels adorning the ladies in heaven. Krishna's effulgence took the shape of a jeweled mace to announce his entrance into the bower of jeweled trees. As Krishna and his servants ascended the dais surrounding the swing, the birds screeched, "Victory! Victory!" So I have a very simple question. After hearing that beautiful passage, what desire did it invoke in you? What do you feel like doing, saying, hearing, seeing?
Thank you so much for your class. Nice class. Nice to see you again. Please, the audience, nice to have time for question and answers. If you have questions, kindly raise your hand or write them up in the chat room.
Well, I've asked a question. I was hoping to get an answer. It wasn't rhetorical. What do you feel like after hearing that? What do you feel like doing? What desire has it invoked in you?
Like going to Vrindavan.
You feel like going to Vrindavan. Nice. Anyone else?
I hope I can have such a vision of Radha Krishna.
Nice. Now, if we'd never heard of Krishna's beauty, how could we ever desire to see it? Right? Isn't it? Anyone else want to share how it made them feel? Maybe it made you feel like running away. Isn't there that verse that if you want to continue living in this material world, don't ever look upon the beautiful lotus face of Govinda, right? There's this verse which says something similar. So maybe you're like, no, don't tell me that. How will I ever enjoy here again if I keep thinking about Krishna with his tilted turban and his reddish lips, you know? So this is powerful. You know, what we feed our mind really has a deep impact on our desires. And when what we feed our mind aligns the desires of the mind with actually our nature, our real nature. It's hard work for our mind and ego to be conditioned. It's hard work for us to be conditioned. We don't want to be conditioned. Teresa, you are sharing your whiteboard, and apparently I'm co-editing it with you. I think that might be an accident. Thank you. So, you know, this is what Maharaj Yudhishthira has done here. And what's being described for us and the way Prabhupada has compacted it for us, it's really actually powerful. He's really inviting us, saying, look, you don't have to wait till the time of death to absorb yourself. You can do it like Maharaj Yudhishthira while you're still here. And as Krishna says to Arjun, you don't even have to give up your activities, right? In the 8th chapter, he's saying to Arjun, his exact words are, therefore, Arjun, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. So in this way, when we do this, then when it comes to, you know, whether forced by time or choice, when we externally wind down, renounce, change activities, because it's quite a disturbance when we have to change our activities in the material world, whether it's because of death or a job change or a loss of a loved one. Inevitably, that change means letting go. Maharaj Yudhishthira lets go and goes deep, absorbs himself. He trusts his understanding of his mind, the fact that his mind in past, present, and future has been absorbed in hearing about, talking about, and serving Krishna. So it's a natural consequence then that whatever state he remembers, he'll attain because he's thinking of Krishna. And he knows, as Prabhupada says, explains that the physical body is a product of the mind at the time of death. If the mind is only absorbed in Krishna, it's inevitable that our true form manifests. It's then inevitable that no physical body is created because the mind hasn't created one. So please, I'd love to hear from you, your reflections, your complaints, your questions.
Hare Krishna, Madhachiti Shakti.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna,
so much
Prabhu.
for the wonderful class. And you were trying to make it a little interactive, but we weren't.
It's okay.
That is okay. My question is, we understand that Krishna, God used 8 separated material energies, 5 gross, 3 subtle, to make all bodies. And so the mind is subordinate to the intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
The intelligence subordinate to the ego. Now, Krishna is saying that whatever we think of at the point of death, that we're going to attain unfailingly. And we also understand that, and you just said it in the class, that Krishna consciousness or God consciousness is beyond the mental and the intellectual planes. So how then does the mind help us when it is really something that does not touch the spiritual aspect of our being? How does the mind then help us?
Because it's a bridge. The mind is unique in that it's a bridge. It can sit either in the material position or in the transcendental position. And we know this from our process of, our stages from Shraddha to Prem, that actually up until Ashakti, there's a big role the mind has to play, because there's still some level of practice around our hearing and chanting. For example, our hearing or our reading to a certain point in our spiritual life, until we have some awakening of who we are, because that awakening isn't a mental, it's not a psychological thing, it's a spiritual thing. It's an awakening of who we are. Until that point, our reading and our hearing is pervasive, it's general, right? We read and hear everything, it's not specific, right? As one starts to experience and have some tangible experience of who they are in Krishna's story, then our reading and hearing starts to become more focused, right, and more selective. So the mind is required, but as we awaken more to who we actually are, the mind is less and less required. It's kind of like we talk about how the spiritual world is right in front of us. It's around us, right? It's just there's a thick layer of the false ego and the mind and the intelligence, clouded by ignorance, which is blocking it. So we find a door, right? When you know that something's right in front of you, you have to find a door, right? Door to it. It's interesting because in Vrindavan, there's seva kunjas like this. If you go to Vrindavan, it's very interesting. You're walking down a little road, a dusty road. There's shops, there's houses, everything, right? There's Brajabasis walking around, cycles, little kids selling stuff. And then you come to this door, okay? It's a door and a wall. There's no roof, there's no ceiling, there's nothing. There's no windows, there's just a door. You open the door, and when you open the door, you walk and you step straight into Sevakunj. And this forest just happens to be there. It's like, hang on a minute. It's just a second ago, just in some dusty street with, bins and Brajabasis and shops and things like that. And now I'm in a forest just by opening this door. So the door isn't really anything to do with the forest. In fact, it's more part of the alleyway, but you need to find that door to get into the forest. So the mind is kind of like that. We have to understand how the mind becomes our doorway, our gateway to our transcendental identity. And that comes through meditating on Krishna's pastimes, because even meditating on his pastimes, it's not just the mind that does it alone. It's Krishna's mercy if he allows our mind to conceive his form and his qualities and pastimes. Prabhupada talks about this, that with our chanting, the name, form, and qualities are revealed, and pastimes are revealed in that order. As the name becomes more fully alive, as we chant more deeply, the name is actually Krishna's name. It's not just a name. It's not just a mantra. It's his name. And as it becomes more and more his name for us, we experience it as that, then we start to also have his form, his various qualities, his charm, his character, his humility, his kindness, his cheekiness, they start to manifest. So do his pastimes. So mind it's that door. But once you realize that even with Sevakunj, once you realize you don't actually need the door, you can just step into the forest. Then the mind no longer, so that once you actually know who you are, then you don't really need the mind. There's actually a verse, I think in the 3rd canto, that says that for a pure devotee, the mind and the body are no longer required to serve the Lord. So the mind is no longer required to play out the service, because actually the service is happening Jiva to Krishna. Okay, me to Krishna. And, you know, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj spoke about this because his, you know, in his final months, his body and his mind were both rapidly deteriorating. And simultaneously, he actually described how, you know, because sometimes we would have conversations about what was going on in the mind as it deteriorates, what happens to the mind, what's happening in the brain, you know, and how that reflects in the thoughts. And he was saying, you know, but beyond this madness of this world, there's a transcendental madness, and it is ecstatic. And I remember asking him, when it seems like your body and your mind are completely dysfunctional, is your internal life still going on? And he looked at me and he said, yes, very much so. But he did also describe that, you know, when you know it's your last birth, Maya lays out all the cards on the table, every possible birth you could have, anything you could have in material creation. All the options are open. And he said, you have to say no to every single thing and say yes to Krishna. Mm. So yes, although just to give you a summary answer, yes, although the mind is material in nature and really directly has no influence over the spiritual realm, it is that doorway. It's a doorway. And if we understand it's a doorway, we won't ignore it or neglect it. We'll try and understand how to walk through it. And then once you're through, you realize, don't really need the doorway. Just jump straight in.
Thank you so much, Mother. Shriman Vara Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, obeisances.
All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Obeisances to everybody. Well, I just, this Shahadev Prabhu's question kind of interests me. And thank you for your answers. I think you've used a very similar analogy. Is a gateway. The mind is a gateway. But I think our scriptures also describe it as a mirror. We often hear about the mirror of the mind. And then the philosophers often say that you are what you think. A man is a product of his thought. Of course, the activity of the mind is thinking and feeling and willing. And then, so it is not difficult to understand that your thought produces your future. It's not that because the mind is in the material, so it has nothing to do for the spiritual. It's actually, like Mother says, gateway, but it's also a mirror. And it helps us to mirror what we want. You know, sometimes we may quarrel with our image in the mirror, but actually that's what you're projecting. I mean, just what you had, you see. So the mind is actually what helps us to create our future. And sometimes it can also help us to remain in the past. So the mind, like she's rightly said, it's a tool. It's a tool. It's a gateway. It's also a tool. And this tool, we have to really know how to use it because it's the most powerful tool that nature has given to man. So most often we hear philosophers always telling us, be careful what you think. In fact, they say, if you want to change your destiny, you can just change the quality of your mind. Think of what you think. Of course, the mind, our conscious mind, the external things, it's one aspect of it, but there's also the subconscious, which is at the background, like she rightly mentioned, what is at the background of our mind, what she also called as Gurudev used to say, internal dialogue. So anyway, so these are all parts of the mind, the play of the mind, but we have to understand that the mind is a tool, and even though it is in the material realm, but it can also help us project into the spiritual, because man eventually is a product of his thoughts. It is how you think that you become. So we have to know how to use our mind to attract what we want. And that's why Krishna tells us what you think. The aggregate of your thought is what is going to produce your future. You understand? So it is not out of place that the mind also has a role to play in our spiritual development. In fact, the whole essence is about controlling the mind. So, and if we make it the best use of it, it gives us a better result, like Krishna promises. So anyway, it's just a small contribution. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to share that, yes, the mind is a mirror, but our Shastras also explain that our mind is covered with dust of conditioning. And yes, we can change our future by changing our thoughts. But I deal with the mind every day in my work, I don't know how many of you know my background, but my day-to-day job is I'm a psychiatrist. So I'm a doctor of the mind. I deal with mental disorders and mental diseases. And what I find, whether the mind is disordered or diseased, or whether the mind is healthy, it's inevitably affected by our past. And we're either dwelling on the past or we're running into the future. We really struggle to be with the present. But it doesn't matter what techniques we use. If they're simply psychological techniques, at best, they will produce a change in the mind. They don't necessarily lead to a change in the soul, which is why, or a real or awakening of who we are. It doesn't mean that they're not useful. It doesn't mean that they're not important, but they have to be done alongside a process of spiritual transformation. Otherwise, even the changes that take place on a psychological platform, they don't stick, because the mind will out-trick and outdo any things we put into place. So it needs an anchor deeper than just thought, deeper than feeling, and deeper than gymnastics, because the dust that's been accumulated over so many lifetimes, we don't know when that next bit of grit is going to come, because the subconscious and unconscious is the majority of our mind. It's 90%. So 90% of our mind is inaccessible to us. So we need something higher than the mind to change our future. It's not simply enough for us to just change our thoughts and change our future.
Thank you so much, Madam Chidi Shakti. Well, like our speaker just mentioned, our speaker is professionally a medical doctor, and she is specialized in the crazy nature of the human mind. So, Madam Chidi Shakti, today we have our brother Jana Chakshu's transformation members here. That's why the class is actually full. I'm sure there are some actually watching on.
Yeah, I was wondering, how come there's 100 people on? Who's here?
These are our god brother Jana Chakshu. He has this movement called Transformation, very beautiful.
Wow. Welcome.
And so he invited his followers, and I'm sure the followers may have lots of questions for you. So please kindly accept their questions and try to help them as much as you can.
I'd be happy to. I just have a quick question. Is there a way of me, this sounds like a really strange technical question, but is there a way of me changing my view so I can see everybody? Because at the moment I can only see you.
Oh, no. I actually made you a co-host. So let me see. Yeah, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to do that. But I just did that. Do you see everybody now? Madam Chidi, you're speaking, but I cannot hear you.
I don't want to, I can just scroll through. I don't want to miss people's hands up. That's all. So you might need to give me a hand if there's people who have their hands up. Okay. I can see Official Gaddafi 1 has his hand up.
Yeah, Official
and Samuel Gyasi.
Yes. Official Gaddafi, please unmute.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was also directed here by Gianna. I'm part of the transformations from Ghana.
Thank you.
So this is my first time. Mine is more like a question.
Sure.
It's more of a problem that I see myself. Actually, in my mind, I have a lot of things that I plan to do. But my problem mainly is I usually think more about the future. than the present. I mean, more like thinking more about the end product more than the beginning, which I know is the most important thing. But I kind of always find myself in there, and it's like sometimes I even get lost with myself in my mind. I even get lost, and sometimes I lose focus. And in this minute, I want to do this. I plan everything. And then the next minute, you see me thinking about different ways of doing it, because I am always in the future trying to solve problems that might arise in the future, maybe 5 years, 10 years from now. So it's like I'm always kind of changing my modus operandi, you know. And in the class, I heard, if I am right, I heard that your mind, you are a product of your thoughts. What about the things around you? That the dust that he was talking about, they sometimes also influence you.
Yeah. Did you join the class later?
Yes, late.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll sum up what I was talking about earlier in the class. So, you know, everything we do, right, before we make the choice to do something and actually act, it's preceded by an intention to do it, isn't it? But all of our intentions are preceded by contemplation, which means thinking and feeling what it might be like to do it and what might happen next. What precedes contemplation? It's a desire. But what determines what we desire? It's what we're exposed to. So absolutely, what we surround ourselves with designs our desire. So what we are surrounded by will determine what we want. Ultimately, that's how advertising works. Because somebody shows you the same pair of jeans 10 times, you think you want those pair of jeans. You think they're fashionable, right?
Sure.
The first time you see them, you'll be like, whatever. But you start seeing them on TV all the time or on a billboard all the time. Then you see all your friends start wearing them. You're like, hey, those look good. I'm going to get myself a pair, right? So repeated exposure is what determines our desires. But which exposure gets activated more or less quickly also is determined by our past, right? Our past is our background music. Right? It's like there's a Velcro. You know Velcro, that sticky stuff. We have our own individual Velcro designed by our past. So based on what we're exposed to now, either it'll stick very quickly or we need more and more and more repeated exposure for it to stick. So you can even see this with spiritual life, right?
Sure.
Some of us have such strong spiritual impressions from early in this lifetime or previous lifetimes that we come into contact with devotional service. And this isn't a psychological thing. This is actually spiritual as well as psychological, that it takes a small thing and we very quickly get attracted. Others, we may find that, based on our previous activities, there's more resistance. It takes us many more times of hearing a particular thing before we accept it, even in devotional life or even practical life. So yes, we are definitely a product of our surroundings. We are a product of our past, but we are also a product of the future that we imagine. So if you worry that your past is going to be there in your future, that is the kind of future you'll create. This is how, trauma causes so many problems for people. It's not the trauma just itself, it's the fact that we dwell on the trauma. We must reflect on trauma and process it and move beyond it. But if we dwell on it, we keep reliving it. We keep bringing the past into our present, which then means it will inevitably manifest in our future as well.
Sure. All right, I get it. So one quick question before you move on is, so how do I overcome this kind of mental battles? Mental battles
about worrying about the future?
I think sometimes it makes me get lost, like I said earlier on.
Our mind tends to worry in the future when we're not busy actually doing something about the future.
Sure.
Right? Sure. Because our mind's biggest trick is making us think that worrying keeps us busy, achieving a result. But the only thing worrying does is keep us busy doing nothing. Because nothing is achieved by worrying. Nothing is achieved by worrying.
Yeah, that's right.
The only thing worrying might show you is that what's important to you. So if you're worrying about your future and a particular aspect of your future, the only thing that tells you is that's important to you. So if it's important to you, set some actual realistic short-term goals for yourself, achievable goals, so you can act on them and achieve those things. People who are busy actually going out and doing something about the future that they want, worry about it less.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Very much.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
then I think I'm done, but I would like to use this opportunity to thank Gianna, because ever since I joined the transformations, I think things have started changing in my life. My way of thinking, everything is gradually changing. So thanks to Gianna very much. Bye.
Thank you.
I think is Gifty next?
Yes, Gifty. Miss Gifty, please unmute.
All right, thank you.
All
Please,
right.
can you hear me?
I can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Welcome.
Good, good, good. First of all, let me say Krishna, Krishna. I'm a new member of Transformation created by Gianna Chakshudas. I'm calling from Ashanti region. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. for the wonderful presentation. I just joined Transformation just about a month ago. And I would like to thank Mr. Gianna for wonderful teachings, wonderful presentation, wonderful mysteries that he is teaching us. First of all, I've understand many things that you've taught us. And it's just, this one is just a recommendation and thanking Gianna for what he's doing for us. And I would like all the global world to know that Gianna is doing very wonderful job, very good job. He has transformed so many people, and we thank him very, very much. Thank you, Mr. Gianna. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Miss
done.
Gifty. Thank you, Miss Gifty. We'll go to Mr. Harold. Please unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My question is the battlefield of the mind actually keeps on coming regarding things of the future. And at times I see myself growing towards the future. And other times you see yourself asking yourself self-centered questions that can you make it or you can't make it. So it keeps on playing like a jingle in the mind oftentimes. You see yourself progressing, and at one time you're also retrogressing. So that's my question. Thank you.
Sorry, could you just clarify your question, just because the volume is very quiet?
Yeah, the volume was a little low.
Okay.
I understand the background. Sometimes you see progress and sometimes you see regression, but what's your actual question, please?
Yeah, it first starts with progression, where you can see things of the future. You make a picture of the future, like this is what you want to do.
Yeah.
But at one point too, you also see yourself retrogressing because of jingles keeps on playing. That can you achieve those dreams? Or you cannot?
So doubt.
Yes, please.
Okay. So your question's about, we have goals, we see a future, it may be a very positive future, but then we see ourselves going backwards because we have this background jingle of self-doubt and fear.
Yes, please.
So how do we overcome that? Is that your question?
Yes, that's my question.
Okay. When the mind is in contact with material nature, with this world, what is the nature of this world? Everything is created, everything grows, and everything is then either destroyed or taken away, right? Okay. Our bodies, our situations are like that, right? Something comes, it develops, whether it's a relationship or a job or a particular status or role we have, grows, it manifests, and then it either deteriorates or it's taken away from us or we give it up, right? Yeah. Our nature is not to have such a backwards and forwards loss and gain situation. Our real spiritual nature is to be eternally wise, So that means we exist always, and we're always connected to wisdom, but we're also blissfully connected. So we're always connected, but happily, not in misery. Whereas here, we're not eternally anything. Everything's transient. Our wisdom fluctuates, our bliss fluctuates, and our connection fluctuates. So we're really like fish out of water. So it's then natural that our mind lives in fear. Some of those fears are born out of the past. Some of those fears are new because of what's going on in the world around us. And some of those are fears about our future. So it's then inevitable that we make a plan for our future, but there'll always be a background score of fear. Because in this world, there will always be a fear of whatever I produce will at some point get taken away from me. It's always going to be under threat, isn't it? You may become successful and become whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you want to become a millionaire or a billionaire. First, your fear is, will I achieve it? Then once you've achieved it, oh my gosh, what if I lose it?
Okay.
So yes, we should all try and live our best life here. But the whole point of spiritual life is that you live your best life here, but use it as a pathway into understanding who you actually are, because that's the only place you'll actually be happy and actually feel real experience of success. Because even the most successful person on this planet experiences fear and misery. That's inevitable. It just is dressed up. It's more dressed up. That's all.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have
Kusha Prabhu, please.
Thank you, Mother, for your nice presentation.
Okay.
Nice class. My question goes back to the verse of today, in the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. The translation is talk about, then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the 5 elements. So because we have new members today, I was thinking maybe most of them join early, like 20 minutes after you start beginning the class. Can you please explain a bit about the 5 senses so they can understand what it's all about? Thank you.
So just in terms of the 5 senses, okay, our sense organs, they're familiar to all of us. We have sight, which is a function of the eyes. We have sound and hearing, which is from the ears. We have touch, which we do with so many aspects of ourselves. We can smell with the nose. We can taste with the tongue. And you know, these different senses and functions of the senses, we often think that they're just to do with the outside world, that they're to do with relating with the outside world. What this verse is explaining is amalgamating the senses or withdrawing them into the mind is the first stage to withdrawing from the world. And this can lead to ultimately connecting with who we are and connecting with Krishna. But even before that, we have some experience of the senses merging into the mind. And I was speaking about this earlier because we do this naturally when we daydream or we meditate. We withdraw our senses from the outside world. We merge them with our thoughts and our feelings, and we imagine. And the power of imagination is so powerful that we can create a reciprocal experience in the senses just with our imagination. If you imagine a fragrant breeze blowing in your face on a hot summer's day, you will smell that fragrance. You will feel it brushing against your skin. So in this same way, when those same senses and the thoughts are directed towards, for example, we read that beautiful passage about Krishna's description, where his left arm is resting on Radha's shoulder, holding his flute. In his right hand, Krishna twirled a lotus flower, while his bangles chimed happily. Now imagine if you withdraw your senses into your mind and you're meditating on Krishna's beautiful face, and you can hear his bangles chiming, and you can smell the lotus flower that he's twirling. Those same senses that were drawing you away from your inner self can be used to push you back into your inner self.
Thank you. So how does you say a technique, a prayer like the Maha Mantra that can help us control the mind?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So how do we control the mind? We understand it has all these tricks to get away from us. So, you know, the mind, as the Bhagavad Gita explains, the senses are inferior to the mind, but they actually are lower than the senses. Can't really do anything without the mind's permission. When a topsy-turvy world, the mind just does whatever the senses say. But actually, in a healthy person, the senses follow the mind. I want to do this, so my senses will do this. Not the senses go, oh, we want to do this, and the mind goes, okay, fine, I'll just do whatever you say. Otherwise, we would have very disorganized, chaotic lives and relationships. Okay, so the senses are inferior to the mind. The mind is inferior to the intelligence, right? So the intelligence is our ability to discriminate, to discern. So mind is like a data processor, right? Whatever the senses send us, taste, smell, touch, sound, visual inputs, the mind goes, oh, look, all of this information is coming in. I'm processing it. But the intelligence is the one that goes, yes, no, maybe, file it till later, maybe we'll do it in the future, or forget it, you know? So whatever nourishes the intelligence determines ultimately what the mind says yes or no to, and then the senses act on it. But superior to the intelligence is our true self, our soul. Now, spiritualizing our intelligence helps to control the mind. Controlling the senses, having them regulated in the way we eat, the way we sleep, the way we speak, controls also the mind. But they're just temporary holds for the mind. It's like if the mind is akin to a wild horse. If you held the head of the horse and the tail of the horse, the head is the intelligence and the tail, the lower end, is the senses. Yeah, the horse will stay still, but the minute you let go, the horse starts kicking again. So you need something that tranquilizes and sedates the horse itself, the mind itself. What makes the mind peaceful? So meditation, in particular mantra meditation. And mantras, what does mantra mean? It means to free the mind of fear in particular. Because the mind is always living in fear, it's always agitated, right? We're always under threat. Everything else is born out of feeling under threat. So how do we make the mind peaceful so that we can actually climb on that horse and ride away into the sunset towards Krishna? It needs some sort of tranquilizer, you know, it needs some sedation. And so mantras do that. They calm the mind down. But most importantly, mantras, words, sounds, because sound has a powerful influence on the mind. We know this. Any of you who like music, you know that your mind could be filled with a million thoughts. You put on some loud music, every thought is drowned out. You go into a club, every thought. You go to a loud kirtan, every thought is drowned out. Okay? Just simply by the power of sound. So when a mantra, the word that you're uttering is actually pure spiritual sound, it literally not just overpowers the mind and penetrates the heart, but it transforms the mind. And that mind becomes soft, and it becomes compliant with what we want to do. It becomes a compliant, obedient student. So thank you so much for that wonderful question about meditation. Thank you, Krishna Prabhu.
So in the material world, does families, relationships, and the world, the crisis and the storm of life, is it because there is no spiritual activities? There's no prayer to God, dependence on the word of God, that is the cause? Or is it only because of the material energy?
Krishna Prabhu, you're here to test me, aren't you?
Because we have so many new members, I want
Sure, no, I understand. Yes, our crises, that's a good question though. Is our crises only for people who aren't spiritual, or do spiritual people also experience crises and difficulty? Everybody experiences crisis and difficulty. But why we do and what we do about it depends on how we view it. Okay? So we're all on a boat in a storm. Every single person on that boat will experience the storm. Some people will experience the storm as, this is catastrophic, my life is over, I'm so scared, I don't even know how to help myself. Somebody else will be like, okay, well, hang on a minute, the storm is temporary, we're on a journey, and I have a destination to get to. I don't want to fall off the boat because I really want to get to my destination, so I'll hold on tight. I'll hold on tight to some sort of pillar or anchor or bar or something on the side. I'll hold on tight. Somebody else has been holding on tight, and now the storm is starting to calm down and they can actually see the destination. What is it that we're holding on tight to? what we hold on tight to is a spiritual understanding of who we are and why things happen to us and for us. Okay? Because if we just think it's happening to us, then it feels like I'm out of control. I'm helpless. This is happening to me. But if we recognize that this is happening for me, then that means I'm the object of whatever it is that Krishna is deciding to allow to happen. If I'm the object, I'm also the object of his love. If I'm the object of his love, then whatever he's designing for me, whether it feels like pain or it feels like pleasure, is ultimately for him to pull me closer to him. Right? So this is the difference between spiritual vision and just having material vision. With material vision, we fear what happens to us because we think it's happening to us, right? It's just happening to me. I'm helpless, it's out of my hands, and I have no choice in the matter. It's too big. But when we have spiritual vision, there's another person involved, a person who's approaching us with love and compassion. And when we know that the person who's approaching us with love and compassion is there behind what's happening for us, then we receive it differently because we trust the hand behind the pain. And when you trust the hand behind the pain, we will endure all sorts of pain, knowing that actually something much better is around the corner. This is the difference. This is the only difference really between how a crisis might manifest in a spiritual person's life versus somebody who has no spiritual connection. It's not how it looks externally. Sometimes if you're spiritual, even greater tests are thrown at you so that you're brought more quickly and much more closely to Krishna. He wants us back quick.
You keep mentioning Krishna. Who is Krishna?
Who is Krishna? So you can see in the picture behind me, you see two beautiful faces. Krishna actually means all attractive. That means attractive to, if we speak complete, just pure philosophy. If we say there's a higher power, that higher power is God. God by nature then has to be independent without any beginning and without any end. For someone to be God, they've got to be independent, right? Otherwise, why would they be God? They're just another person like you or me. They're also dependent on somebody else. So God has to by nature be independent. If God by nature is independent, God also has to then be the source of everything in order to be independent. If they're the source of everything, then he's also the source of all beauty, fame, wealth, strength, renunciation, everything, love, which means that God is also all attractive. So Krishna means all attractive. All attractive as in there's no color, there's no gender, there's no caste, there's no social class, there's no material boundary that stops us from being attracted. But also equally, the same way he's attractive to all, he's also attracted to all. He's also attracted to every single person. And because he's attracted to every single one of us, he's always finding ways to get us to connect with him closely. So this is Krishna. And he has many names, Allah, Yahweh, Krishna, Ram, Govinda, so many names. And in each of these names are bestowed different qualities of himself because they describe different aspects of the complete. So this is it's very simple, actually. That mantra is someone's name, because just like a person loves to call the name of their beloved, everybody loves to hear the sound of their own name. Krishna's no exception. And he especially likes it when we call him sweetly. Then he really comes running and he stays.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. I was thinking about one answer you gave about when we believe the hand behind the pains we're going through, then we'll take it lightly and coolly. And I was thinking, like, nobody wants to be touched by a knife, but we voluntarily go to a surgeon for the surgeon to operate on us because we know that behind the pain is also going to relieve us of our pain.
Yes.
So that is a very beautiful
Me and you are twinning in our thoughts. I did a radio piece last week for the BBC, literally opening with that very same sentence, that we will go to great lengths to go see a surgeon, to relieve ourselves of pain, even though they're going to put us through pain. We'll welcome that pain to help protect us from something much greater, because we know something better is going to come. So yeah, we're twinning. Absolutely. We will. We do that with our mothers, right? Our parents, you get a splinter, mother comes with a needle to remove the splinter. And you know it's going to hurt, but you know it'll hurt more if you leave the splinter in, right? It's because we trust that pain feels less and it's over quicker.
Yeah.
You know, we're not sadomasochists. Spiritualists aren't like, yes, please just make me suffer. That's all I want. No, we'll accept suffering for something higher, but we don't want it unnecessarily. I mean, we're pleasure-seeking beings. I mean, Krishna says this himself, you know, we've got nothing to do actually but play.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Oladi, may you please unmute?
Who's it, Larry? Yeah?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Mother, thank you very much for the lovely class.
You're very welcome.
Lovely presentation. I have one question. My question is, when we try to master our mind to get what we want, and as man thinketh in his heart, so is he, and all that, how is it correlated with our karmic reaction? You know, probably they said if you master the mind, you can get anything you want. And there is a karmic reaction that you do not know how you are going to upset it, whether good or bad. Can such mastery change what you have in your karmic record, or karma is superior to the mind? That's my question.
That's a very, very good question. So these days, you know, all these business people, life coaches, people who want to sell a book, they throw around this statement very loosely. You can have whatever you think of. Okay. Like the mind is the most powerful thing in all of creation. What they don't tell you is up to a point. So again, the point is your karma, right? You can have whatever you want based on what you've already got, what you've already accumulated. So, you know, you can, it's like going into a store, right? Someone says, here's your American Express credit card. You can buy whatever you want. But American Express say, yeah, but you've got a credit limit of $2,000, okay, or $16,000, or whatever your credit limit is, but you're going to have to pay it back as well. Okay, so yes, each of us has a karmic ceiling where that karma affects, first of all, whether you'll get it, but also when you'll get it. Okay, so yes, you can have whatever you put your mind to, but your karmic blueprint determines how soon you'll get it and how you'll get it. But if you are liberated, then you see that much more quickly. What does liberated mean? Liberated means that you are no longer bound by the laws of karma. You're no longer bound by, it's like you're a diplomat. You know, a diplomat goes to other countries and they're not bound by the laws of that country. They're only under the jurisdiction of the country they come from. So they can throw rubbish out of their car. They can get parking tickets. They never have to pay for them, right? They don't have to pay fines. So when we really become at a certain point in our spiritual life, even before we become completely pure, one achieves a liberated state where the laws of karma don't affect them. This is dangerous though, because in one sense, you can have everything you want, anything you want. It manifests quite instantly. You know, some devotees may have experienced this, that whatever they think of, it happens. You're like, okay, that's kind of scary. But actually, if we continue to connect with the process, we'll realize actually it's not that fun having whatever we want in this material world. And it's interesting because by the time you have that liberated state where you can, whatever you think of it manifests, even the tiniest little thing, which can be quite irritating. Imagine everything you think of manifests. It's really irritating because sometimes just a thought passes through you. I didn't want that really. Why does it manifest? You know, by that time, actually, your attraction to spiritual life and Krishna is quite strong. And one quickly goes, actually, Krishna, I don't want anything and everything I ask for. Can you just, thy will be done? Whatever you want, let's just have that, please. I'm your puppet. I just want to be with you. So actually, this thing of whatever you think of, the mind can manifest. Yes, up to a point. Your Amex card of your mind has a credit limit, you know, but even when you have no limit, and you actually get to know the person who gave you the credit card in the first place. And you realize actually it's way more fun being with the person who gave you the credit card than having a credit card without a limit. Then you just like, actually take the credit card back. I'll just hang out with you, because that's completely fulfilling.
So if Mother, so if I get you right, your mind is your card and your karma is your credit.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for summing it up like that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Shriman Mahaprabhu, please unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It's just some contribution to Kusha's Prabhu's question. He had asked how the Maha Mantra can help to spiritualize the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to throw some more light on that. Mataji had already explained a lot of things about meditation as a way of tranquilizing the mind. But the Maha Mantra is, of course, beyond all that. The Maha Mantra, we cannot estimate, its values. In fact, the scripture says that if one compares the chanting of Maha Mantra to giving millions of gold of horses or gold in charity, that person is an infidel. It's like an atheist, because we cannot compare any meritorious activity to the Maha Mantra. But now, how does it really help us to spiritualize the mind? The mind is constantly creating thoughts, thousands of thoughts. It's like a factory creating thoughts all the time. Some of them we want, some of them we don't want, I just come, deluding us with so many thoughts. Now, the Maha Mantra is not just only chanting it once. It has to be done repeatedly in a repetitive manner for certain hours, and if it's possible, even throughout the whole day. So the effect that the Maha Mantra has directly on the mind is that it tranquilizes, yes, but it also stops the mind from creating too many thoughts. You've given it a duty to perform, to have to focus on only one thing. And that is a training for the mind, because in its, in its waywardness and, just frivolity going around, you have to bring it back to a focus. And that is when you associate it constantly with what is spiritual, the holy name of God, then it trains the mind to become focused and concentrated. So that is how it becomes spiritualized, because it gets to constantly associate with holy name of God, what is holy, what is saintly. And by that constant association with what is holy, the mind also becomes holy. We can say a lot about this, but I just want to throw this little light, because it's a very big subject, how our mind gets gradually transformed and spiritualized through meditation, especially mantra meditation. So I hope that will be helpful. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shriman Mahaprabhu. Your contribution actually leads me to a question I have for Mother Chiti Shakti. And that is, it's very wonderful that somehow Krishna arranged for the text to be centering around the mind. And you are the right person to speak to us about the nature of the mind. Now, my question is, the nature of the mind, as we understand and we all experience, is that of accepting and rejecting. This mind is very troublesome. The mind encourages me to accept something, which I truly appreciate. Like the beginning of the year, I accept certain things and I write down all these things that I'm going to do within the year. I accept them. And then I do them for maybe a week, at most a month, and then I reject them. So my question is, how do we put a stop to this rejecting part? of the mind after we have knowingly accepted what we know it's going to help us. Even though we know this is going to help us and we accept it and we try doing it, but because the nature of the mind is rejecting it at some point, we are unable to deal with the mind to a point that the mind will say, no, I'm not going to give this up. So how do we do that?
It depends which stage of our spiritual life we're at. See, our mind is, I was talking about it being a student, but it's also kind of childish. It needs to be entertained, right? It's always looking to be entertained. But the mind is also very aware that once we say yes to spiritual life, that there's going to come a point at which the mind is no longer going to exist. And this is why I was bringing up Bhaktitirtha Swami, when he was saying that, when it's your last birth, when it's your last appearance here, Maya gives you all these options, what else you could do in the material universe just to try and keep you here. And the mind gives, he also said the mind gives you way more trouble than it normally would. Because, see, when the soul leaves the body and transmigrates to a new body, the body doesn't throw up so much of a problem, right? Because we're getting a new body. The mind throws up even less of a problem because the mind's like, well, I'm coming with you anyway, right? I'm coming with you anyway. It's okay. Let's go, right? It's like the hard drive of the computer. It's always there. That's why we have so many memories, so many things that push us, compel us, that we don't even remember. But when it's your last time, the mind, ego, everything dies. The body dies, everything dies. And so the mind puts up a fight. So this happens not just at the time of death, but actually when we say yes to spiritual life, many people will find their mind will give them more trouble than it normally does. Why? Because what we're actually indirectly saying to the mind is, your time's up, mate. Yeah, you're no longer in control. I've listened to you for far too long. I'm getting back in the driver's seat. You're going to have to start listening to me. Now, unless our intelligence is not saturated with good reasons for the mind to carry on cooperating with us, it will throw everything at us. It will throw doubt. It will throw complacency. It will throw guilt, shame, fear, anger, everything. It will throw a desire for things in this world that we never even thought we had. I didn't even know I liked that. It's really good, right? That seems interesting. Let's try that. Oh God, I used to like that. I don't like it anymore. Let's get away from it. And so then this mind becomes like let's just try everything. We've had millions of lifetimes. Let's pull something out, right? It's like when you try to clean out your phone, the pictures in your phone. Now we get so many pictures on our phones, right? Not just pictures we've taken, but pictures that have been sent. Have you ever tried cleaning them? Have you ever tried going through your phone and going through 3,000 pictures or 4,000 pictures? All of a sudden, all these different, I didn't know I had that. Oh, that's so nice. I think I'll keep it for a bit longer, right? You're never going to look at it again, but you keep it, right? You're sitting there thinking, okay, I have 5,000 pictures. I'm sure I don't need 99% of them. I'm going to clear them. But then as you start going through them, 5 minutes later, you're starting to realize that, I'm actually keeping a lot more than I'm throwing away. So this is what the mind does. It shows us, look, come on. Do you really want to get rid of me? Come on. I've been your friend for so long. So what do we do? What do we do? How do we deal with that? It is just this simple. It sounds simple, but it is actually that simple. Understand its nature. We know, look, mind, you're going to have to become my friend. That is the only way really for you to continue. And so we understand the nature of our mind. What are attachments? What are our aversions? What's the manuscript in the back, the score, the music score? What are we avoiding? What future do we want? We put that on the bedrock of our spiritual practice. And then our spiritual practice transforms our distractions into adventurous hurdles. Okay, the only difference between an adventurous hurdle and an obstacle is our vision. So the mind, we can either be fearful of our mind or we can understand it and understand, okay, at this point in life, you are going to keep just fighting me. And right now, because I'm chanting, my chanting is going to show all the nonsense that is in the mind so that I can decide, do I want to keep this nonsense or do I want to get rid of it? Because if you imagine it, right, our mind is like a brick wall between us and Krishna. And a brick wall has many bricks. As we start calling him, hey, Krishna, Krishna, Ram, Radharani, we're calling them, right? And first that endeavor removes the first block. I want you. I want to know you. So there's this one little gap, right? One brick space. Krishna's kind of peering in. We're trying to peek, trying to see. And he says, oh, hang on a minute. You've got all of these other bricks. And so as we chant, our fears, our worries, our attachments, our desires, all of those start to manifest. And so that's why we have this concept of bhoga tyag, enjoy, accept, and then reject, throw it away. Attachment, aversion, attachment, because none of them are a comfortable position because none of it's satisfying. So Krishna says, oh, hey, look, you've got this brick here of this desire. Do you want to keep it here or shall we throw it away? And so we take to, our chanting can sometimes make us feel like, oh my gosh, where did all this stuff come from? Maybe I should stop chanting. Don't. Because if you want to clean a room, if you want to remove those bricks one by one, you're going to have to look at every single thing and then decide, do I want it or do I not want it? Because removing the dust from the mirror of our mind and our heart means that we have to willingly do it. No one's going to do it for us. Willingly doing it means, yes, even if Krishna says, I'll take it for you, he first checks, do you want me to take it for you? If we say, can I just a little bit longer? Can we just keep it for a bit longer? Or maybe we can look at it next week. He says, oh, okay, I'll put it back. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mother.
Prabhu, I'm just looking at the time.
It's late your time. Yeah.
I can maybe take, if there is one more question or comment, I don't know if there are any more hands up or anything in the chat room. I haven't been to the chat room. Oh, there is a question here in the chat room.
Let me see.
Here we go. So the question is, this is from Seth. Most of the time when we plan things, they don't go as one wants it. But when we're not planning things, they mostly go well. Wow, really? That's interesting that you find that when you don't plan things, things go well. Well, I think it depends. I mean, if your question is in the context of him, the way I understand your question is also around expectation rather than planning. Right? When we have expectations, there's often disappointments. But when we tend to kind of go with the flow and be grateful for whatever comes our way, we're generally pleasantly surprised, isn't it? I agree with that. And it becomes even more powerful when we put Krishna in the mix, because if we make our endeavor, but we work according to our nature and our training, we fulfill our obligations based on our particular roles in society and in our communities, we live with integrity, then the outcome of that, if we leave that to Krishna, we'll generally find that he'll surprise us with something that's far greater than what we could have ever imagined. And so there's a difference between expectations and planning. We want to plan in one sense, as if everything does depend on us, but be attached to the result as if it's ultimately in Krishna's hands, because we know that his hands will bring about the most auspicious outcome. It's something that cannot be really philosophically applied. There has to be some affection, some relationship for that hand behind the events that happen for us. And that means getting to know that person. And how do we get to know that person? Yes, we call his names, but we read about him, we hear about him, we spend time with those people who have affection for him. And in this way, we understand that person better. And so it's much easier then to conceptualize and live in such a way where we try our best, but know that the loving person behind the, delivery of the consequences will always give us the best, better than we can ever imagine. There are actually quite a few questions that in the chat room that we did maybe overlook.
One was asking about his concern about possibility of Third World War coming up. And another person that is family. No, Samuel JC says, I find this question very thought-provoking, which I think I also would want to have an answer to that. Do we need to say a word when angry? What should be the reaction when one is angry? Like when someone is mad at you, what do? Do you say a word back to him or her? You do not say anything, you just walk away.
Well, it depends.
If you do walk away, what goes on in your mind? That probably also matters.
Yeah. I mean, so how do I overcome the fear of catastrophic events like World War III, which could happen to this world? Well, you know, just like our desires are born of what we expose ourselves to, so are our fears, right? If you never turned on the telly, you wouldn't hear people's perspectives on what's going to happen after the Ukrainian war. Is it going to be a world war, right? Or who you listen to when you turn on the TV or radio determines what you fear and what you desire. So there's two sides to this. One is, what do you expose yourself to? And also look at your past. Maybe there's things that have happened in your past that make you fearful. You know, sometimes people are brought up in environments and cultures where they have been surrounded by an imminent danger of war. And so they carry that with them. So I think it's important to look at what you're exposing yourself to now, as well as your past. There was a question about the anger question. What do we do? You know, anger has different ways of manifesting. I'm keeping my answers short on purpose. So anger can be very hot anger, where you really feel it as a fire, like you want to react. And some people have that kind of temperament. They need to get an expression of their anger out there and then. And if you are this kind of person, then I would say pause, think 3 times, try and understand what you're angry about, see yourself at fault first, take accountability, and then express yourself. And that requires practice, because if you're a hot-headed, angry person, chances are you'll speak before you've really thought about it. So you have to practice that. On the other side, some people have a very cold anger, where they turn the anger inwards. When it's hot, they don't know how to express it, so they turn it inwards. It becomes cold and heavy and turns into resentment. And on the surface, it can look like they're walking away and they're peaceful, but inside it eats away at them and it breaks down the relationship. What I would say is, if you're that kind of person, you may be walking away, but don't let go of your anger. Actually go and look at what you're angry about and find a way to express it that communicates what your needs are, but also comes up with some sort of solution, where the accountability again comes back to us, because we can only ever change something if we acknowledge our accountability. So there's no right or wrong answer to how to react. You have to see, what's my default? And let me train myself to the opposite often. Unless you're good at dealing with anger, there's usually a truth in anger. If you find out that your knowledge is going down, is there a mantra you can recite? So just like I was saying before, you know, the source of everything means the source of everything. Krishna says, he says, all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness comes from me. Now I'm dealing with the mind and the brain every single day. And yes, there's a biochemical aspect and a neurological aspect to knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. But higher than neurology and biochemistry is transcendence, is spiritual remembrance, forgetful, and knowledge. So actually, ultimately, whether Krishna uses our neurochemistry or our biochemistry or our neural networks to help us to remember, or whether it's through a blessing, it's ultimately him behind it. So you call him, you will open up knowledge and intelligence that's beyond just the limitations of our material IQ. Spiritual intelligence is far more expansive, far more far-reaching, and far less limited. Our human IQ is limited. It deteriorates with time and it's limited. It's not, I'm not saying it's not useful, but it's not the ultimate. So having a mantra that just increases our material intelligence, again, it has a ceiling. But having, uttering a mantra that increases our spiritual intelligence means we're no longer limited by our material intelligence. I am going to stop there if that's okay, Sahadev Prabhu.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time and the wisdom and the technique giving us here today to deal with our mind, because this mind, unfortunately, to most of us, have not yet become a friend. And we better know how to deal with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this point, we're going to humbly request all the assembled devotees here to kindly unmute, and then we chant big Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation for our speaker's presence here for today. Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Sir Dave, we're not hearing anything. Sir, there is no voice. Hey,